Okay, hello everyone. So this week's topic is going to be about the subject. And here we have it. So all complete sentences, pay attention to that. Complete sentences have two basic parts. So the first part always is the subject, and then we have the predicate. And we're going to introduce those concepts shortly. So the subject is, let me move myself here. The subject is the person or thing that the sentence is about. So the subject actually is the protagonist of the sentence, okay, like the focus of it. For example, here in this sentence, it says, the boy dances every day. So what is the protagonist, or the most important thing here is the boy, right? So that is the subject. We have some steps to recognize it, and we're going to check that in some minutes. We also have this other part of the sentence that is the predicate, and it says something about the subject. So we already have the protagonist or the doer of the action, and then the predicate says what is going on with this protagonist, okay? Or with this thing or with this idea. So we have usually in the predicate the verb and some more information. For example, in this case, the predicate is dances every day. So there we have more info about the subject that was the boy. And we know that he dances on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on. And, well, we need to know that in a basic sentence structure, we have three parts. The first one is the subject, the verb, and then the object, okay, or SVO. For example, here we have it, the students are reading medical records. So there is the basic structure. The students as the subject, the verb, or the action, or the state sometimes are reading. And then we have medical records. That is more information about what is going on here. Okay, so we can have more details. This is a basic one. We can have like longer sentences. Today we're going to be focused on the subject. So as we were saying, it is the thing or person that the sentence is about. Okay, so it's the focus of all attention of the sentence. And we can have that the subject can be a person or thing that acts, that does an action, okay, the doer of the action, or it can be someone or something that is described, okay? So there is no action, actually. It's just a state. As we can see here, here is the person or thing described. There is the subject, Eugenia, and there is a verb, is smart, okay? So we're talking about her. And then we have here an action, a doer of an action, Eugenia runs, okay? So there again is the most important thing in the sentence in this case, that is Eugenia. Now, the subject can be a noun, a pronoun, or a phrase. And here is an example of a noun, a proper noun in this case, that is a word that names things, people, places, or ideas. And in this case, it says Pavlov. That is the name, that is the noun in this case. Pavlov was a psychologist. As you can see here, we are talking about the same person. So the subject can also be a pronoun. That is a word that replaces a noun. Okay, in this case, we have he. We know a lot of more pronouns that we usually talk about. For example, I, you, we, they, she, he, it. Those are pronouns. In this case, it says he was a psychologist. So the focus of all attention, we're talking about he, right? Him. And then we have a phrase that a subject can also be a phrase that is a set of words put together, okay? And in this case, the phrase is the old man, right? So there is the subject because we are talking about that. We're talking about him, about the old man. And as you can see, we have three ways to refer to the same subject. And now, how can we identify the subject? So we have two very easy steps. The first one is to find the verb. So that is very, very important, because with that, you're going to be able to find any subject that is there in the sentence. And how do we know that the verb is there, or what is the verb? Because the verb is the action or the state that the sentence talks about, okay? So in this case, we have an action, something that is being done. For example, the action here is walked, okay? So there is something going on, something like that actively is happening, okay? And also, we can have a state. So in this case, the verb is from the verb be, right? But this is a state because actually nothing is happening. So we're just describing something, describing a state of being, that in this case is to be called, right? You need to be careful with this because the verb, that is the action or the state in the sentence, is part of the predicate, okay? This is just helping you to recognize the subject. Solamente les está ayudando a reconocer el sujeto. El verbo es parte del predicado, okay? Nos indica una acción o un estado. The verb can be in the past, can be in the present, or can be in the future. So sometimes we're going to have a verb that has two words. For example, we can say is walking, and that is the verb, is walking, together. And step number 2 is ask who or what to the verb, okay? So once we recognize it, we should ask who or what before the verb. And here we have the example. It says, Jennifer walked to the store. So we ask, who walked to the store? And we know that it was Jennifer, and there is the subject, okay? And with the second example, we have the soup is cold, and we ask to the verb, what is cold? The soup, right? So there is the subject, and those are the 2 steps that you need to follow. We are going to clarify just some things for you to know. The first one is that in an imperative sentence, the subject is implied. So in some sentences, the subject is not going to be there explicitly. And in these cases of imperative sentences, the subject is you. Now, maybe you are wondering, you are thinking, what is an imperative sentence? Well, an imperative sentence is a type of sentence that tells you to do something, okay? Or commands you to do something, or orders you. For example, an imperative sentence can be, open the door. Okay, so there is no subject actually, and it is implied, and we can find out that the subject is going to be you because I'm referring to you. Entonces ahí tenemos una oración imperativa, ¿no es cierto? Que nos ordena hacer algo. En ese caso, el sujeto está implícito, no está explícito dentro de la oración. Y si yo les digo, por ejemplo, abre la puerta, el sujeto no está allí, ¿no es cierto? No estoy diciendo tú abre la puerta, sino que digo solo abre la puerta. Y como está implícito, yo asumo que en este tipo de oraciones el sujeto va a ser tú, porque estoy dándole una orden a alguien más. Tú abre la puerta. Presta atención. Tú presta atención. Okay, so the subject is implicit there. We have another exception. It says sometimes there can be more than one subject in a sentence, so you need to be very careful with this, because sometimes you're going to have 2 sentences put together, okay, with no dots. So you need to follow the same 2 steps. You need to first recognize all the verbs that are there in the sentence, and then recognize the subjects, okay? So with those steps, you're going to be very fine. Okay, next one, it says here and there are never subjects in a sentence. So sometimes we have some sentences that are called expellatives. And in this case, the subject actually comes after the verb. Why? Because let's take an example. If I say, there are many apples. En el caso de esa oración, there are many apples. El sujeto no sería there, sino que yo reconozco el verbo primeramente, que sería are, ¿no es cierto? Y pregunto, what are there? ¿Qué hay allí? Y mi respuesta va a ser many apples. Entonces, solo en el caso de esas oraciones que tienen here y there, el sujeto pasa a ser la palabra o objeto, digámoslo así, palabras que están después del verbo be. ¿Ok? Just in the case of here and there. And finally, we have this other point that says the subject can be a gerund or an infinitive. So be careful with this, because as we were talking about, the subject can be a noun, a pronoun, or a phrase. But sometimes the sentence is going to start with a gerund that is an ing form or an infinitive that is a to form of a verb. For example, we can have a sentence that says, running is very hard. ¿Ok? Correr es muy difícil. Running. There we have a gerund. Y como se dan cuenta, en este caso el sujeto es una cosa, es una idea, un objeto, right? So we ask to the verb, what is very hard? Running. Or we can have, to read is always good. Leer siempre es bueno, right? Y tengo mi verbo, ¿no es cierto? Is, and I ask to the verb, what is always good? To read. And in that case, we have an infinitive. So we're going to look at some examples just to be clear. And what we're going to do is the following. You are going to have 20 seconds to find the verb and recognize the subject. Okay, so to follow the 2 steps. And then we're going to check and see why is that the subject. Okay, so 20 seconds. Good, time's up, and we have the sentence that says, Angela answered many questions. So first we recognize the verb, and then we ask to the verb, who or what was happening, right? So here is the verb answered. As we can see, it is in the past. Está en pasado el verbo, ¿no es cierto? Respondió. Y preguntamos, ¿quién o qué respondió? Who or what answered many questions? And the answer is Angela, right? So there is the subject of this sentence. This is very, very simple. This one, okay? And in this case, the subject, as you can see, is a noun. Como pueden ver, en este caso es un sustantivo, nuestro sujeto. Next one. Okay, so in this case, we have my sister is writing an article. And we're going to see. In this case, the verb is writing. And we already mentioned this. Sometimes the verb is going to be in different tenses, okay? So, for example, in this case, we actually have 2 parts in this verb. Tenemos 2 partes en este verbo, ¿no es cierto? Is y writing, presente continuo. Y en este caso, todo esto es el verbo. Así que yo pregunto, who or what is writing an article? And we answer my sister. So, there is the subject. That is the doer of the action. Ahí está el que realiza la acción dentro de esta oración. Y en este caso, como pueden ver, es una frase. Okay, my sister. We have a set of words. So, the next one. Okay, so in this case, we have this, and it says, be careful, that dog is dangerous. And we're going to check just this part of the sentence. Okay, that dog is dangerous. And here we have it. So here we have the verb that is, right? The verb be. And we asked the verb, who or what is dangerous? And the answer is that dog. In this case, the subject is a phrase again, ¿no es cierto? Y tenemos una pequeña frase nuevamente, that dog, ese perro. And we need to be careful because we were talking about this too. In the previous examples, the verbs were actions. And in this case, we don't have an action. Actually, we have a state, right? A description. Acá tenemos un estado, una descripción. Acá el perro prácticamente no está haciendo nada, sino que solamente estamos describiendo cómo es. Okay? So keep that in mind. The verb can be an action or a state. Good. Next one. Okay, so I hope that you could recognize the subject here. It says, read the book, please. So first the verb, right? And the verb was read. And we asked the verb who or what read. In this case, who read the book? And the answer is you. Como vemos, estas son oraciones imperativas que habíamos mencionado anteriormente, oraciones que le indican a alguien hacer algo, dan una orden, right? Y esta es una orden, lee el libro. Ahora, ¿quién lee el libro? Tú lee el libro. And that is the subject. In this type of sentences, again, the subject is always going to be you. En este tipo de oraciones imperativas, right? En que el sujeto está implícito, el sujeto siempre se va a deducir que es tú o you. Next one. Okay, so in this case, as you can see, we have a question actually. It says, can you smell the food that my mom is cooking? So we have subjects and predicates not only in sentences, but also in questions. Tenemos sujetos y predicados no solo en oraciones, sino que también en preguntas. Y quizás esta fue un poco más difícil. Si se pudieron dar cuenta, había dos verbos que reconocer, de hecho. The first verb is smell, and the second verb is cooking. So we are going to ask the question for the first one, smell. What or who, right? Who or what smells that food? ¿Quién huele esa comida en este caso? Who smells that food? You. Right? Aquí tenemos nuestro sujeto. Ahí está la respuesta de esa pregunta. ¿Quién huele la comida? Tú hueles la comida. And for the next one, reconocemos, ¿no es cierto? Ahí is cooking. Who or what is cooking? In this case, who is cooking? ¿Quién está cocinando? And the answer is my mom. So as you can see, we actually have two verbs and two subjects for each of them. The first one is a state, right? And the second one is an action. So, next one. Okay, so here we have the sentence that says, here is Tom and Sally. And something that we need to remember is that this sentence starts with here. So we have an exception, actually. Acá tenemos una excepción, ¿no es cierto? Comienza con here, entonces reconocemos el verbo que es is, y como habíamos hablado, las oraciones que comienzan con there o here, el sujeto no es ni there ni here, sino que el sujeto viene justo después del verbo, ¿ok? In this case, the verb is, and we ask, who or what is here? Tom and Sally. And that is the subject in this special sentence, okay, in this expletive. Next one. Okay, in this case, we have to smile is always good. So this was a hard one because we have to smile and we have is. So there are a lot of things to think about, but we need to remember the other exception that was that in some sentences we can have a infinitive or a gerund for a subject. ¿Ok? Entonces el verbo principal aquí, en verdad, es is. Y luego pregunto, what is always good? To smile, right? And there is the subject. So, as I was telling you, this is one of the exceptions that we need to be careful about. And that's it. Okay, so you can find a link with some exercises to practice on the description of this video. En la descripción del video va a haber un link con algunos ejercicios, los va a dirigir a un documento con ejercicios para poder practicar con las oraciones, con reconocer el sujeto en este caso. And that is all for this